I first heard about this movie actually was about a few years ago. One of the Hong Kong producers, they came to me and wanted to do a action flick, an action movie, anything. Nothing to do with, of course, our end product, the SPL, right? He wanted to do a period film. Then after months of working on the script and finally we came out to a conclusion that period film wasn't the way to go, because the past couple of years Hong Kong films focused too many on the period pieces. The basic story actually was created by Wilson and obviously his scriptwriter. Then when I came on board afterward, I changed it around and gave my input with all the action structures. The whole idea of this film, the whole message, the theme so-called, actually the Chinese title of this movie, SPL, is taken from the Cantonese character Saat. Saat is these 3 stars in the Chinese zodiac, and they represent each character, each meaning. Wilson, our director, wanted to take these opportunities to say something about society, that if you do bad things, there's a cost to it. And whether you carry in a badge or you deal with drugs and do bad things. I was a cop. I've done it in the wrong way, which meaning that I've done bad things. At the end, I paid for the consequence. That's the Wilson Yip's approach, you know, and actually that's really his style of filmmaking. He liked to explore the darkness of mankind, and you see in his earlier work. Some of his best works they're pretty dark, pretty sad ending. I've pretty much done everything under the sun: period film, modern film, kung fu flicks, you know, all of those. As an action director, as an actor, as a director and a producer. Throughout many years of my devotion to the industry, I was always known to really still maintain the realistic approach to on-screen fighting. Okay, whether it is a period film or a modern film, I focus a lot on the realism of action movements on screen. And I see that the past couple of years, just too many of these period film wire for nothing, and for the sake of wire work. I think by the time we come with an action film, I don't think the audience would want to go back and see these type of action. So I wanted to go back to the basic where Bruce Lee started it all, right? I think action film is just like any other type of art, music. It's expressing yourself. It has to be as real as possible. I think the most classic artistic expression are the one that are totally truthful. If you want to make a martial art film, it has to be that actor has to be a real deal. He has to know martial arts. Okay, you can't have a editor, have a director comes in with fancy camera works and cut them up with the shots and expect the audience to buy it. Everybody know martial art nowadays. Every single one, doesn't matter what culture you are. Martial art is no longer an Asian thing. It's a world trend. You know, it became a part of our life, right? You see it on TV, you see it on cartoon, you see it everywhere, right? So in SPL, that was my approach, bringing the real martial arts back to action films. There's a misconception of how to make an action films, I think, in today's filmmaking world, right? I think a lot of people, when they think of actions, they think of a lot of movements. In some degree, of course, right? There's pretty obvious reason, but I think people are taking the action itself for granted, that they think anyone who have no idea of physical movements, when you try to film a person doing action or physical expression, you move the camera all over the place. You're missing the beauty of the physical movement itself. So in SPL, what I attempted to do, and I believe I did it successfully, was that I didn't want to rely on certain cuts for the sake of cutting. Okay, we need a close up here, and we need another shots over here. I didn't think it was necessary, especially when two actors were well-trained martial artists, right? I wanted to bring the beauty of watching it from a distance, watching it from a full perspective, so you can see the whole body's alignments, the expression of full body execution, and kept that shot as long as possible, so the audience can truly appreciate our performance. As a filmmaker, as a director, I wanted to bring the uniqueness of whatever the genre is. SPL is a modern cop film, right? And it's based on true story. It's based on reality in Hong Kong. Cops, gangs, right? There's no need of fast-cutting MTV style, and I mean, of course, I'm not taking that away. I mean, certain scenes, certain drama scenes, it's okay to move the camera all over the place, but I think I follow the particular style of the film to determine what style of camera movement or editing style that I eventually will put in film. I think in the Western industry, for the longest time, martial arts choreographers, they are just choreographer. They come to the set and they choreograph certain movements. Dance choreographers choreograph dance. Martial art choreographer, we are hired to choreograph a bunch of martial art movements, and then the director would come in and set up his camera. In many cases in Hollywood, lavish production, they would have multi-cameras, 10 cameras, trying to capture a bunch of specific movements. Most likely, that particular director have no idea these specific movements, what they are, and their definition, and how do you shoot them. So therefore, out of inexperience, they use multi-cameras and trying to capture everything, and then just throw it back to the editor. And then, same time, the editor have no idea what they are, and they chop it up. So at the end, you have the least efficiency out of these movements. But for Hong Kong action industry, for the longest time, action director or martial art choreographer, in most cases, we are the director of the film. I mean, it makes all sense, right? How are you going to expect to shoot these movements if the director have no idea what they are, right? So obviously the action director or the martial art choreographer, when they design these movements, they design it with a specific shots, angles, and editing points. So therefore, for the longest time, the Hong Kong action films has been the most exciting and the most defined, and everything was in such details, right? Because that's how we work in Asia. In my films, I pretty much structure the script before the drama director comes in, because in 9 out of 10 films that I'm in, those are action-oriented films. So therefore, the action leads the way. The action set up the rhythm, set up the trend. So I would structure I will work closely with the script writer. I work closely with, of course, with our director, with the way I set up all the action scenes, right, to make it a very Donnie style action films. My relationship with Wilson would go all the way back about a decade ago. Obviously, we've been both working in the business, Hong Kong industry, for more than 20 years. Wilson started off as a messenger boy in the old Cinema City studio, and everyone knows I was working with Yu Mo Ping, and then later on for my own company. About 11, 12 years ago, our mutual friend, a producer, was helping out another filmmaker, another director on his smaller budget film, and he asked Wilson to help that director to direct several of his drama scenes. And he also asked me to help him out with the action scenes. That's how we met. I wanted to work with this director one day, and then this whole SPL opportunities came. The producer wanted me to make a Donnie action film, and I said I have to team up with a director who specializes in something that I'm not. I at times neglect. First of all, we both have mutual respect for each other. At the same time, like I said before, because this is an action-oriented film, I will have to lead the pacing. I have to guide the direction of the whole style of the film. So therefore, I would come up with what kind of style I would like to see this film at the end, what kind of pacing. In my action scene, I control from the shot one all the way to the end shot. How every camera angles and movements and the actors comes into the set from A to B. I pretty much oversee everything all the way into the editing room. I edit every shot, every frame. A lot of times I would tell him at my end shot, or he would tell me or his end shot, and we work from the crossing shots. Many times I would probably have to do his first shot, because like I said, it's an action-oriented film. I have to keep on keeping the pacing throughout the film, and how keep the tension, and sometimes it takes specific shots to move the rhythm of the film. So perhaps at the end of the action scenes, I would, at least into his drama scene, I would establish a couple of opening shots for him to lead the continuum of the pacing. Working with Samuel, working with Wu Jin, of course, it makes my life a lot easier, because he's one of the greatest. I have so much respect for him and his works. And not to mention the fact that I never worked with him until SPL. I worked with everyone else under the sun, right? Jet Li twice and Jackie twice, and pretty much I fought everyone in the industry except for Samuel. So it was really exciting for me to be able to work with him and be able to have a great fight with him in the film. I've been asked many times, would I have pressure working with someone like him? You know, not at all. I was really motivated and thrilled to be able to square off with him on films, and the only pressure I always give myself, just like every other films, is the pressure purely on myself, because I'm constantly trying to top my own work. My reaction to Samuel's acting, I always have a great admiration for his contribution to our industry, from his directing films, from his acting abilities, and I have no doubts that he's going to give this character a blast. This is his very first time playing a bad guy, right? A bad character. But like you said, after the films came out and all the critics were saying, it's probably one of his best work in his entire career. Working with Simon Yam was another a blessing for me as well, because to be able to have great acting performance on films, you need to interact with other great performers. And Simon's very experienced of a great fine actors, and I worked with him in the past, you know, and knowing that most of my intense scenes are with him, I felt very relieved. He had more experience than me as far as doing different sorts of character acting and dramatic roles, and have a lot of his ideas and his knowledge and which he shared with me on the set, and I was very thankful, and definitely helped me to really study my character in the film, and had another perspective of how to deliver such intense character. As far as the pacing of the whole film, the beginning is a little bit slower, much slower than the end. One obvious reason, even though I stressed the fact that I was trying to structure the whole pacing and the rhythm of the whole film. One simple answer: we didn't have enough budget. So we focus more on toward the end, because that's what the audience want. You want a resolution at the end. You want a final climax. It was between me and the two main bad boys. So in the beginning, we didn't really have enough money to play with. I mean, I wish we had a little bit more budget to play with, and I would probably enhance all the rest of the action scenes. The original plan for the opening was that it was a montage flashback of Samuel building up his empire, and pretty much a big action scenes of showing his skill and establish his pressure, his power. So this is the person that I'll be eventually end up fighting, to kind of get the audience anticipation to the end. At Hong Kong filmmaking, we don't really have a final script. Sometimes we change the script all the time, on the set. That's unfortunately, I'm not encouraging that's the healthiest way to shoot a film. It's always best to have a complete shooting script. But in our case, because of many circumstances and reasons and budgets, and we just have to be a lot more flexible than say Hollywood industry. We didn't have enough budget to really want to shoot what we want. I was finally able to convince our investor to, after we shot pretty much every scene, and he came up with a little bit more budget, so we went back and went back to the streets and did that scene, and Wilson just came up with the idea with how do you bring the one man's power over the streets of Hong Kong with his army of triads members, right? At the same time, we have to deal with the time and the money, and how do you finish that scenes, So we came up with this idea of how about him as a leader, as the king of the jungle, where he just raises his arms and everybody follows, So he came up with this idea on the set that, how about Samuel coming down the stairway with drinking a bottle of beer and raising his arm, and everyone does the same thing, and created that unification under one man, and it worked, and everyone really loved that moment, that particular shot. I was always respected in the industry, and always they for some reason throughout the many years in my career in Hong Kong, I always have a pretty good going with both the triad world and the cops world. One incident I remember, many years ago, when I was driving my car to one of the worst area in Mong Kok or something, and I wanted to and I saw this empty space, and someone parked in next to an empty parking space, but he wasn't parked in the empty parking space. He was just in the way of me parking into the empty space. So I pulled over, and of course I kind of acknowledged that I wanted to drive in, and he just kind of totally ignored me in disguise, and tattoo all over his arms and everything, and he turned around, he saw me, and immediately he gave me my acknowledgement and say, brother Don or something, he said, you want this parking space? I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna give it to you right away, So incident like that happens to me all the time, or I would get pulled over by cops, and and then he comes in and he's like, "Oh, we're brothers," because I play so many cops roles, and he's like, "Oh, you're one of us," So, just be careful next time. I'm not saying that anyone should be driving illegally and break the laws. We should always respect the laws, but like I said, I always have a pretty good relationship with both sides. But I'm learning new things all the time. In order for audience to watch and martial art films, you really have to keep up to date. And on the one hand, I'm as continues to strive to be a better martial artist all the time. Even though I spend most of my time right now dedicating to the film world, but I started off as a martial artist. This is my blood, so I try to follow up with what's out there. And obviously, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and the UFC fighting styles are the hardest things all over, And I didn't want to miss the opportunities to learn something new, and I saw, and no one really tried to, or at least successfully anyway, to really put these type of fighting style on films. I mean, you could easily turn into a documentary, and you might as well just watch the UFC fight, right? Watch it on cable or rent the DVDs. But to really put it on films and shoot it the right cinematic way, I didn't think it was done before, and I wanted to do that in SPL. I think these type of fighting, close range fighting or ground fighting, but to shoot it a proper way and also bring the true elements of these fightings, the essence of fightings, it really takes a lot of understanding of martial art itself. And on the other hand, you really have to understand how to shoot action, how to shoot martial art. Otherwise, if neither of these cannot be missing, both elements has to come together and make it right on film. Understanding of martial art, true martial art, the techniques, the movements, the direction of these movements, the body language. At the same time, understand your film language and how to bring film language across, collaborating with the rest of the story and the characters. The process of putting movements on screen, that particular ending scenes. Let's say that the process of putting all martial arts actions on screen, at least the way I do it is, you have to understand films, you have to understand characters, you have to understand storytelling. Then you incorporate other elements like martial arts in this case. What kind of background does my character have? What kind of martial art training? How do you approach it? But of course, throughout many years of making martial art films, I already know my techniques of the film techniques. How do you capture these movements? I have it in my ways. I would have it in my head first. Then I would come up with visions. I would come up with images, and because of my many years in the film industry, in these type of films, right? All these shots are already edited and connected in my head already. So when I walk on my set, I see the location, and I would kind of guide, I direct pretty much. I direct the in the Western industry. You walk through it. I think that's the term for it in the Western industry. You walk through the scene. Okay, character A comes in, and what do? You meet character B. Okay, what do you do? Okay, and then these movements start kind of brought it out of my head. And the first step is I would have some of my assistant to kind of play me and play the opposite opponents and kind of walk through these movements. And as I was walking through these movements, that these movements already established in my head, I would also instruct my camera operator and say, this is the shot I want this shot, that shot, and then this is the long shots, and I would cut away from this shot, and basically just drawing out all the visions from my head and working with all my technicians, cameraman, my martial art assistants, and everyone on the set, my actors, the props, and then we walk through it several times, and we go right into it. We didn't have enough. We usually don't have enough time anyway, right? But in SPL case, we didn't have that many so-called rehearsal times to block it out. So we pretty much went to the set and start shooting it. I wanted to bring all the back to the basic martial art fighting, which is something that I think audience haven't seen for many, many years. Too many action films, whether they're big production Hollywood films or even Hong Kong local smaller budget action films, they get carried away with the sophistication of filmmaking nowadays, moving the camera, editing, and CGI or whatever, right? And they've forgotten that the higher degree of martial art filmmaking is the performer itself, the martial art actor himself, how he delivers his movements. So in that long sequences in that alley scene, I purposely wanted to capture the one take, as many movements as possible, the shot as wide as possible, because sometimes a lot of people tend to use a lot of close-ups. Actually, close-up is easier because you don't see the legs and you don't see the body language, and so therefore it takes a lot less out of the performance. But to really perform in a wide shot, the artist has to really put out to make it right. You can't slow it down. You can't be lazy. You gotta get down to the stances, and you gotta. So that scenes, it was purposely planned out, and I wanted to capture long shots. And basically, I told Wu Jing, I understand that he have years of experience of Chinese Wushu, meaning these form demonstrations. So he's very good at body language and big movements. So I said to him, I said, this is something that I want to capture, like more of a freestyle, realistic fighting. And I gave him a guideline of directions, like, okay, I'm going to come at you, like, say, 20 to 30 moves, and in control, of course, but basically I want to do this and do this, and I want you to do something in return and attack me. In the beginning, he was a little bit nervous about the whole idea, because then he said to me, that's almost like real fighting. And I told him, don't worry about it, because I have my own experience of combat and different. Ever since I was young, I was more into the sparring experience. So I told him, this is the kind of concept I wanted to bring. This is the kind of flavor, almost like real fighting. So in the beginning, he was a little bit wasn't too sure about the idea. I said, let's try it out. Don't worry. But of course, in my mind, once I roll the camera, I'm gonna push it to the limit. Basically, I wanted to get him going and push him where he really react, instead of reacting to the moving to the choreography. Actually, there weren't that many. There weren't a choreography for those, especially for those couple of shots. It was a directions. It was a guideline of positioning. All the movements were free, basically like a free sparring. But when I roll the camera, I push the envelope. I really attack him. But of course, I pull back and just to feel. How sometimes when you see two boxers, when they play it out and they first start off and just jabbing, playing off, and then they would push the envelope a little bit, and they would eventually end up real sparring section. That's what I wanted in that particular few shots in that scene. is to get my opponent really react to real reaction. And then what does he do? He wanted to really attack me. Then I just kind of work along with it, you know, and then to capture it. That's one thing I wanted to capture, and successfully it worked. You know, it came out really looking real because it was almost real, you know. And the other thing I wanted to do was to really fight with impossible, really hard to shoot, is short weapons. He was using a knife, and I was using a baton, police stake. Now, usually when people start shooting these kind of shorter range, smaller objects, they use a lot of close-ups, which is understandable because so the audience can see the character of the objects, and to enhance the power of that objects or the weapons. But like I said, in this scenes, I wanted to show how real they are. So I didn't really go right to the close-up of these weapons, which made it very difficult, because it's very difficult to swing around with a little knife in a wide shot. Because first of all, you can't see the knife because the shots are so wide. So what do? You really have to move your body and really perform with your body, and then really make these weapons as threatening as possible using these big movements. That also, I don't think many people dare to attempt to do, you know, to put on a screen like that and shoot short objects and short weapons in such a wide shot, because you can easily, at the end, looking with no power at all, no effects, you know, not threatening at all. But you know, everything worked out, you know. So I was very pleased with those couple of shots. You really put it on the screen, and it takes a lot. Not only the concept, you also take to performance really understanding how to move with their body in a wide shot, big movement. At the same time, really know how to control themselves. Otherwise, I mean, we could have killed each other. But you know, it worked out, you know, and I knew what I was doing. To shoot something like that, it has to be as real as possible. And to capture realism, you can't repeat it all the time. You know, after a while, it will become mechanical. It will become repetition, right? So, I think the best reaction should be the first time. But of course, we have to make some adjustment of maybe, you know, the cameraman couldn't maybe out of frame. So we made a few adjustments. It took us about 2 or 3 times. Yeah. When I'm directing myself, obviously it's much harder than when I'm directing another person. But on the other hand, sometimes it's easier because I know exactly what I want out of that shot, and I'll deliver. Whereas if I'm just action directing for another, even if he's the greatest martial artist, but he doesn't understand what kind of vision, what kind of body language that I want on that shot. So he can't give me the exact flavor what I'm talking about. I'm not even talking about movements, because movements are just movement, like Bruce Lee said. We can all throw a side kick, but to throw a side kick with charisma, uniqueness, that's something special. That's something that takes a lot of years of film experience, acting experience, understanding your lens, and your interacting with the audience. You're flirting, you're playing with the audience, right? That takes a lot. So when I'm directing myself, on one hand, physically, mentally, I'm much harder on me because I have to do it all, right? But on the other hand, it's easier because I pretty much know, okay, I need this shot and how many movements and the way I move, I'm gonna work. I'm gonna synchronize with the camera. You know, these camera movements is something that I already planned out. So at the end, it's very specific. As a actor working in front of the cameras, and because I've just so many years of working in these type of films, and those films were the standard of those films were so the level was so high that it gave me so much experience, so much knowledge of right now you can just turn the camera in, and I have a sixth sense. I have a feeling of, even if the camera is behind me, and I know that in which angle I'm being shot. And sometimes I make adjustment for the cameraman. So if his timing is a little off, or for example, if his camera comes too close, I would adjust my choreography and physical movements, and by taking a step back and to keeping that specific framework, specific rhythm and physical expression on these shots. So I kind of work hand to hand. It's like dancing with the cameraman. Why do I think it took that journey to have SPL discovered? Just like any other great film, I think filmmaking today is a collaboration of not only talents and technicians and salesperson. It takes a lot of timing, and it has to go through its own journey, right? Being tested, and test the water, and you just never know. I mean, the biggest box office, I understand that many successful American Hollywood blockbuster, they would put on shelf for the longest time until they were, one producer came up with a vision and thought that, let's do this, and boom, you have box office groundbreaking numbers. I think that's what happened to SPL. I think there's an old Chinese saying, if you real gold, you can withstand the test through times. What do I think this film worked? I think first of all is obviously the action. Is how these action was shot. I mean, yes, some of the choreography they were interesting and they were refreshing, at least for the longest time. Audience haven't seen these type of movements, and then having some wider shots and long shots, seeing two real martial art actors without cutting away, showing off their skills, and at the end fighting with Samo, putting in some of the UFC fighting style. That's something fresh, right? But I think it's the overall approach of how do you bring these action on screen on a cop movies. I mean, if you think of cop movies, cop gangster actions, you think of fast cutting. A lot of camera movements, right? In SPL case, we didn't really need that because we were so secure and so confident of the movement itself. The reason why I wanted to work with Wilson before SPL, because I wanted to really explore the possibility of these type of films. Usually when you think of a martial art film or an action film, you don't think of heavy dramatic moments, right? You don't think of sensitive moments. Usually are just fast-paced action, boom, excitement. So combining a director like Wilson, I think it would be a great chemistry, combining together. Having that type of artistic, slower pace, kind of more of a European style of filmmaking. Combining a Hong Kong action, Hollywood style actions. Combining the two would give you something fresh, and it worked in SPL.